The pharmacist called the name twice before the old man moved. Whitfield. Eugene Whitfield. Eugene Whitfield stepped forward from the plastic chair in the corner, the one closest to the wall, farthest from the door, the one people sit in when they're hoping not to be seen. He was 71 years old, wearing a coat that had been good quality once, maybe 15 years ago, dark green with brass buttons that someone had polished recently. His hands, when he placed them on the counter, were the hands of a man who had spent decades doing precise, careful work. A surgeon's hands, which is exactly what he had been. "That'll be $212, the pharmacist said. Her name tag said Brianna. She was young, maybe 24, and she said the number the way young people say numbers that don't mean anything to them personally. Eugene Whitfield did not flinch. That was the thing about him. He never flinched where people could see it. He reached into the inside pocket of the green coat and pulled out an envelope. Not a wallet, an envelope. The kind people use for birthday cards. He counted the bills on the counter. Brianna watched the line behind him grow. 40, 60, 80. He smoothed each bill like it mattered that they were flat. Because it did matter. Because these were the last ones. 100, 120. The man standing 3 places back in line shifted his weight. He was maybe 35, wearing the navy blue uniform of the Fulton County Transit Authority. A bus driver still in his work clothes at 6:15 in the evening. His name was Deshaun Parrish, and he had been on his feet for 9 hours, and he had $17 in his checking account until Friday, and he was here to pick up his daughter's inhaler. And he was watching Eugene Whitfield count money onto a pharmacy counter the way you watch something that reminds you of something you don't want to be reminded of. 140, 160. Eugene stopped. He looked at what was in his hand. He looked at what was on the counter. He did the math that everyone in line had already done for him. He was $52 short. "I can," he started, and then he stopped, because whatever he was going to say next, he couldn't finish it. He had been a cardiothoracic surgeon for 31 years. He had stood in operating rooms at 2 in the morning with someone's heart in his hands, literally, and he had not wavered. He had delivered news to families in waiting rooms that broke them open, and he had held his composure through every one of those moments, because composure was what they needed from him. He knew how to control a room with his voice. He knew how to make people feel safe when nothing was safe. He did not know how to stand at a pharmacy counter and tell a 24-year-old named Brianna that he was $52 short. "Sir, I can hold the prescription if you want to." "No." The word came out sharper than he meant it. He softened immediately. "No, thank you. I apologize. Let me think." He began slowly gathering the bills back from the counter. That was almost worse to watch than the counting. 40 years of training people to do things with dignity, and here was Eugene Whitfield in a Walgreens on Peachtree Street, undoing what he had laid out with the same careful hands. Deshaun Parrish took one step forward, then stopped himself. He knew better than to embarrass a man like that. You could tell from 10 feet away that this was a man for whom embarrassment would land like a wound. The coat, the posture, the way he'd placed the bills flat. This was not a man who was accustomed to being watched struggling. But Deshaun also knew what it felt like to be short. He knew what it felt like to be counting, and he knew that the worst part was never the money. The worst part was feeling invisible while it happened, or worse, feeling seen. He stepped out of line. The woman behind him sighed audibly. He ignored her. "Excuse me," Deshaun said. He said it to Eugene's back, because Eugene had half turned away from the counter as if he needed a moment. "Excuse me, sir." Eugene turned. He looked at Deshaun with the specific wariness of a proud man who already knows what's coming and is preparing to refuse it. "I got it," Deshaun said. Simple as that. Not "can I help you" or "would you like," just "I got it," like it was already decided. "You don't need to do that," Eugene said. "I know I don't." Deshaun was already reaching for his wallet. "How much you short? Son, how much?" A beat of silence. Eugene Whitfield looked at this man in the transit uniform, this stranger with tired eyes and work-worn shoes, and he performed the kind of rapid involuntary assessment that surgeons do. Not of patients, but of situations. He was reading Deshaun the way he'd spent a career reading rooms. $52, Eugene said quietly. Deshaun opened his wallet. He had cash, $60. The emergency cash his mother had told him to always keep folded behind his license, and which he had replenished and depleted and replenished so many times over the years that the fold in the leather there was permanent. He put 3 20s on the counter. That's too much, Eugene said. Brianna, can you give this man his change? Deshawn said, not unkindly. Brianna looked between the two of them. She gave Eugene his $8 back. Eugene Whitfield stood with $8 in one hand and a white pharmacy bag in the other and looked at Deshawn Parrish for a long moment. Not with gratitude exactly. Or not only with that. With something more complicated. The expression of a man recalibrating. Thank you, he said finally. Don't mention it. Deshawn moved back toward the line. What's your name? Eugene asked. Deshawn turned. Parrish. Deshawn Parrish. Eugene Whitfield. He extended his hand. Deshawn shook it, and Eugene held on for just a second longer than a regular handshake. This medication is for my wife, Eugene said. He didn't know why he said it. He hadn't planned to explain anything. But something about being helped made him feel like the least he could offer was the truth. Her insurance lapsed. There's a gap while we sort it out. It won't be. He stopped. I don't know why I'm telling you this. You don't have to, Deshawn said. No, I know. Eugene nodded once. Thank you, Mr. Parrish. He walked toward the door, and the automatic glass opened for him, and he was gone into the evening. Deshawn stepped back up to the counter. He picked up his daughter's inhaler. He had enough for that, at least. He checked the label, Simone Parrish, 8 years old, and put it in his jacket pocket where he could feel it the whole drive home. He didn't think too much about what he'd done. That's the thing people don't understand about moments like that. There's no grand internal monologue, no conscious decision to be a good person. It's more like, you see something, and your body moves before your head catches up. He'd been short before. He knew the particular humiliation of that specific public moment. And he had $60 in his wallet, and this man in his good coat and his careful hands had only needed 52 of them. Math is math. He drove his bus route home that evening thinking about something else entirely, about whether Simone's teacher had sent home the permission slip for the field trip, about whether he had anything in the fridge worth eating, about whether the check engine light that had been on for 3 weeks was something he needed to worry about yet. Normal life resumed itself around him the way it always does, indifferent to whatever small pivot just occurred inside of it. He did not know who Eugene Whitfield was. That matters. It matters because of what comes next, and because of what it says about why Deshawn did what he did. He didn't help a famous surgeon. He helped an old man in a green coat who was short $52. Those are different things, and Deshawn only ever knew about one of them. Eugene Whitfield had retired from Emory University Hospital 4 years ago, after 3 decades, as one of the leading cardiothoracic surgeons in the Southeast United States. During his career, he had performed over 4,000 open-heart surgeries. He had trained 67 surgical residents, a number of whom had gone on to run departments at hospitals around the country. There was a fellowship in his name at the Emory School of Medicine, the Whitfield Cardiovascular Fellowship, funded by an endowment that he and his wife Cecilia had established in 2019. In 2021, Cecilia Whitfield was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease. The progression was manageable at first, then it was not. By 2023, she required daily medication, some of which was covered well by insurance, and some of which was not. Eugene managed this the way he managed everything, methodically, without complaint, without burdening anyone else with it. He had liquidated investments quietly. He had declined speaking engagements that would have paid well because Cecilia's care required him to be home. He had stopped going to the events and dinners and galas where people wanted to shake his hand and take photographs. He had not told his daughter. That was the part that would come out later and undo people. His daughter, Vanessa, lived in Charlotte. She called every Sunday. He told her things were fine. He used the word fine the way surgeons learn to use reassuring language, with just enough specificity to feel credible, not enough to invite further questions. We're managing. Your mother has good days and bad days. We're figuring out the insurance situation. You don't need to worry. She believed him because he had never given her reason not to. Because Eugene Whitfield had spent his entire adult life being the person other people leaned on, not the other way around. He didn't know how to need things from people. He genuinely did not possess the skill. It had been trained out of him so completely and so long ago that he could no longer locate it in himself. The night he came home from the Walgreens on Peachtree Street, he sat in the kitchen for a long time after Cecilia had gone to bed. He sat with the pharmacy bag on the table in front of him and the $8 in his hand, and he thought about the man in the transit uniform, Deshawn Parrish. tired eyes, worn shoes. He had come to that pharmacy to pick up a child's inhaler. Eugene had noticed the small size of the bag, the pediatric label. This man had a child who needed an inhaler, and he had $60 in his wallet, and he had handed over 52 of them to a stranger without being asked. Eugene sat with that for a long time. He was not, by nature, a sentimental man. He was precise. He valued data and evidence and demonstrated outcomes. But he was also a doctor, which meant he had spent a lifetime watching what people did at the edge of their capacity. And he knew what it looked like when someone gave something that wasn't excess. When the giving actually cost something. The next morning, he called the Transit Authority of Fulton County and explained that he was trying to reach a driver named Deshaun Parrish to return some money. The woman on the phone was confused, then skeptical, then told him she couldn't give out employee information. He understood. He left his number. He didn't hear back. He tried twice more over the following week. Same result. He thought about other approaches, the pharmacy perhaps, but Deshaun had paid in cash and Brianna hadn't run his card. There was no trail. A man had done something quietly and left, the way good things often leave, without paperwork. Eugene sat with that too. 6 weeks later, Vanessa came to visit. She had told him she was coming for a long weekend, that she missed her mother, that she wanted to be there. What she did not tell him was that she had noticed the things in his voice over the past several months. Not what he said, but the small gaps in what he said, the fractions of a second before fine, where something else briefly occupied the space. She was her father's daughter, trained by the same man, and she knew how to read a room. She went through the mail when Eugene was in the yard with Cecilia. She was not snooping, or she was, but with love, which she had decided was different. She found 3 letters from the insurance company, 1 past due notice from the specialty pharmacy, and a statement from a retirement account that had been significantly reduced. She sat at the kitchen table with those papers in her hands, and she did what Deshaun Parrish had done in the pharmacy 6 weeks before. She moved before her head caught up. She called her husband, Terrence, and she said, "We're moving them here, or I'm staying there. I need you to pick one with me." Terrence, who knew better than most people that Vanessa did not call to negotiate, said, "I'll start on the guest room this weekend." She did not make a scene about it with Eugene. She knew that a scene would cost him something he couldn't afford. His sense that things were under control, that he was still the one holding things together. She sat down with him instead, at the same kitchen table, on the afternoon of her second day there, and she placed the past due notice between them, and she said, "Tell me what's actually happening, Daddy." He looked at the letter. He looked at her. And Eugene Whitfield, who had delivered unendurable news to 1,000 families and held his composure through every single one of those moments, opened his mouth and found that the sentence he needed was not available to him, so she said it for him. "You've been doing this alone," she said. "This whole time you've been doing this alone." He nodded. One nod, barely perceptible. She'd seen him make that same motion in operating rooms when a resident caught an error that he had also caught, the small acknowledgement of a man who doesn't waste words. Dad. She put her hand on the table near his. Not on it, near it. She knew him well enough to leave him the space to close the distance himself. You trained people for 30 years to ask for help. You made it part of the protocol. You told them that asking for help in the OR was not weakness, it was the whole point. He said nothing. You told me that. When I was little, I remember you saying it. She paused. You said the surgeon who thinks they don't need anyone is the most dangerous person in the room. A long silence. I didn't want to worry you, he said finally. His voice was level, carefully level. I know. She picked up the letter. We're going to fix this. That's not a conversation. That's just what's happening. But I need you to let us fix it. He looked at the letter in her hands. He thought, not for the first time, about the man in the transit uniform, Deshaun Parrish, the $60. The math is math of it. There was a man, Eugene said. He had not planned to tell this story. But there it was, about 6 weeks ago at the pharmacy, he told her. When he finished, Vanessa sat quietly for a moment. He didn't ask any questions, Eugene said. He just covered it. He didn't need me to explain myself. He just saw what the situation was, and he handled it, and then he went back to his place in line. Yeah, Vanessa said softly. I've been trying to find him, to pay him back. She looked at her father, this man who had held so many people's hearts in his hands, who had been so sure for so long that the right thing was to handle things alone. And she understood something she hadn't quite understood before about why he needed so badly to return the money. It wasn't about the money. It was about the debt of being seen. About what it meant that a stranger in work clothes had looked at him in a hard moment and not looked away. "We'll find him," she said. "They found Deshaun Parrish the way you find people in 2026. A friend of Vanessa's knew someone who drove for Fulton County Transit, who knew Deshaun's route, who knew when he took his break." Vanessa went to the depot. Not Eugene. She had argued this point carefully, and Eugene had conceded it, which itself was remarkable. She found Deshaun in the break room, eating a sandwich over a county transit schedule, and she introduced herself and she explained who her father was. Deshaun listened. He shook his head slowly, the way people do when a thing is more than they were prepared for at lunch. "The pharmacy on Peachtree," he said, confirming. "With the green coat." "That's him," Vanessa said. "How's his wife?" The question landed in her chest. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because she had expected "how much was it?" or "why are you here?" And instead this man had asked about the wife, the detail her father had offered as the only personal truth he could give at that counter. "Holding on," Vanessa said. "It's Parkinson's. It's manageable right now. I'm glad," Deshaun said. She put an envelope on the table. $60 plus something extra that she and Eugene had argued about. He had wanted to send $1,000, and she had told him that would feel like a transaction, and he needed to think about what he actually wanted to communicate. They'd landed on a handwritten note and $200, and Deshaun was going to refuse it. She could see that already, so she said quickly, "Before you say no, my father is a doctor. He operated on hearts for 30 years. He needs to be able to close things. Please let him close this." Deshaun looked at the envelope. He looked at her. "Simone okay?" Vanessa asked. She had learned the daughter's name from the friend of a friend. "The inhaler." Deshaun blinked. "Yeah, she's good. He paused. "You did research. We're a medical family. We do due diligence." Something in that made him almost smile. He picked up the envelope. He did not open it. "Tell him he doesn't owe me anything," Deshaun said. "He knows that. He also can't stop himself." She stood to leave. "He said to tell you. He said the man who thinks he doesn't need anyone is the most dangerous person in the room." Deshaun looked at her for a moment. "What does that mean?" "I think," Vanessa said, "it means thank you. There's something that happens when a man like Eugene Whitfield asks for help. Not performs asking for help, not reluctantly allows help. Actually asks, actually lets the wall down and says, "I cannot do this part alone." It doesn't happen in one afternoon at a kitchen table. It happens over time in increments the way scar tissue softens. Over the following months, Eugene allowed Vanessa and Terrence to move closer. He allowed a home health aide, 3 mornings a week, while he ran errands or went to the hospital. Not to operate, but to mentor residents, which was something he'd stepped back from, and which it turned out he had badly missed. He allowed the fellowship committee to include his name on a fundraising letter without redirecting all the credit, which had always been his reflex, because he'd been told his whole career that a black surgeon who appeared to seek recognition was read differently than other surgeons, and he had internalized that calculus so deeply that he'd lost the ability to distinguish humility from self-erasure. He called Deshaun Parrish, not to thank him again. They'd covered that. He called because Vanessa had told him that Simone was 8 years old and had moderate persistent asthma, and that Deshaun was raising her alone. And Eugene had asked one of his former colleagues, a pulmonologist named Dr. Harcourt, over at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, to review her case. Not as a favor owed. As one doctor looking after a kid who needed it. Deshaun picked up after 2 rings. "This is Dr. Whitfield," Eugene said. "I'd like to talk to you about Simone's care if you have a moment. Not as a debt. I want to be clear about that. As a colleague, I'm a surgeon, not a pulmonologist, but I know one who's very good. And as a man who thought your daughter deserved better options than she might know she has." A long pause. "Dr. Whitfield," Deshaun said. "Yes, you are something else, man." He said it with the specific warmth of someone who doesn't give that sentence out easily. "So I've been told," Eugene said, usually not in a complimentary tone. Deshaun laughed. It was the first time Eugene had heard him laugh. It was a good laugh, full, no performance in it. They talked for 40 minutes. Simone Parrish started seeing Dr. Harcourt in November. Her treatment plan was adjusted. By March, she had gone from missing 8 school days to missing 2. She joined the after-school choir, which required sustained breath control, which her pulmonologist called a therapeutic bonus. She did not know the chain of events that got her there. She was 8. She knew that her dad had gotten her a new doctor who was nice and who let her pick the sticker from a full book every visit. She knew her chest didn't hurt as much when she ran. She knew her dad seemed lighter lately. Not happy in a performance way, but lighter, like something he'd been carrying had been redistributed somehow. Kids notice these things even when they don't have the words for them. Deshawn noticed too, which was stranger and more private. He had spent years running a tight ship on very little. Financially, emotionally, logistically. He had gotten very good at the particular efficiency of a person who cannot afford to spill anything. And now there was this retired surgeon calling to ask about his daughter's pulmonologist. And Vanessa Whitfield texting links to a childhood asthma research study and a resource hub for single parents navigating pediatric care. And the Transit Authority colleague who somehow knew about an unclaimed city assistance program for children with chronic conditions. He had not asked for any of it. It had arrived the way the $60 had apparently arrived for Eugene Whitfield, not as charity, but as one person looking at a situation and saying, "I can do something here." He had done that once, for a stranger in a green coat, because the math was simple. The math was apparently still going. Eugene Whitfield attended the Emory graduation ceremony in May of that year for the first time since his retirement. He hadn't been back. It had felt too close to the life he'd stepped away from, and he was wary of the particular grief of standing at the edge of something you used to belong to entirely. But one of his former residents was receiving an award. Dr. Aaliyah Kimmons, one of the 67, now running the cardiac surgery program at Grady Memorial. He went because she had called and asked, and he was practicing saying yes to things that cost him the pride of appearing to need the connection. He sat in the auditorium and watched the ceremony with Vanessa on his left and Cecilia on his right. Cecilia dressed carefully, slowly, with the particular determination of a woman who has decided that Parkinson's will not take this from her too. She held his arm through the whole thing. He kept his eyes forward and his breathing even, and he did not think about how long ago he had sat in an auditorium like this one, young and certain and unbroken. He thought instead about an evening in November at a pharmacy counter on Peachtree Street, about a man in a transit uniform who had stepped out of line, about $8 change and a white bag and the specific weight of being seen at the wrong moment, about what it does to a person to be seen like that. To have someone look at your situation and not look away. The room was full of people who would go on to hold other people together in the most literal sense imaginable, who would stand over open bodies with instruments in their hands and make decisions no one else in the room could make. And Eugene Whitfield, who had been one of them, sat among them and understood something that he might have been too certain to understand before. That the most important thing he had ever taught in 30 years of teaching was not a technique or a protocol or a surgical approach. It was the other thing, the thing about not being the most dangerous person in the room. It was asking and answering. It was stepping out of line when you could, and allowing someone to step out of line for you when you couldn't. The sky outside the auditorium, when the ceremony ended and the doors opened and people spilled out into the Atlanta afternoon, looked exactly like the sky always looked in May. Broad and blue and indifferent to the small seismic things occurring beneath it. Cecilia took his arm. Vanessa was talking to someone from the program. Dr. Kimmons crossed the crowd and embraced him, and he let her, and it didn't cost him anything. Somewhere across the city, Deshawn Parrish was finishing his afternoon route. Window open, one hand on the wheel. Simone's choir performance at school this evening. She'd reminded him 4 times that morning, which meant he had approximately 4 more reminders coming between now and 5 o'clock. He wasn't thinking about Eugene Whitfield. He was thinking about whether he could get Simone flowers from the bodega on the way, and whether carnations were a good flower for an 8-year-old or if she'd find them boring. He decided she'd find them boring. He'd get whatever was brightest in the bucket. He stopped at the light on Campbellton Road and felt, without quite naming it, the way the day sometimes feels when everything in it has gone to the right place. Not perfect, not easy, just right-sized, like the load was distributed properly, like the math still worked.